to show them that they have a voice and that they could be their authentic selves in any space. It's very important that we have high school students here intermingling with middle school students and elementary students so that they have a goal and they see where they can be and they get excited about graduating.
People to look up to, like student athletes and stuff, and they have a good future for themselves. And that's something I want to have, a good future.
To me, this event is a good way for young girls and older girls like me to come together and see what we all can do as a whole group and team.
What we want to do is break stereotypes for young girls and make sure that, being loud and being joyful isn't seen as a negative, but a positive of expression through art, through painting, through dance, through song, through hair care classes, so that they have great self-confidence, great self-esteem, and they have a great self-direction in life.
It is an opportunity for us to celebrate our young girls, to acknowledge them, to amplify their voices, to hear them. We want them to know that we appreciate them, we love them, we see them, and we are here to support them.
And once we all come together at this event, it's all of the girls in Region 2 to see each other, to have common conversation, to understand, you know what, I do have a voice. I am worthy, I am valued. The beauty of being at the art museum is to see the art that takes place.
I enjoyed the painting, I really enjoyed the painting, the self-portraits. I enjoyed that they gave us free stuff, lip gloss and gifts and stuff when we came, that the energy was good and that they welcomed us.
It's good because you get to talk to new people and share what you have in common. It was pretty fun outside. We learned karate and it was a pretty awesome day.
What an awesome opportunity for our elementary girls to see that middle school and high school girls are able to share and have conversations with them.
I like that I could be an example towards them because, they're still growing up. Well, I'm still growing up too, but, they look up to us and, we're role models for them.
I think it's good to know, for some young ladies, to know that you're not alone and that it's not always about, the bad things, and that we can all come together and make something positive all together. We can help each other and not make it envious or a competition, and that we're all here and we're on the same boat.
I think today, with battling so many negative connotations on social media and how people use social media, this gives them an opportunity to post positive things and to say, I belong, I matter, I'm loved, I'm nurtured. And so it's that counter narrative to some of the things that cause anxiety and depression.
You are unique, you are beautiful, you are brave, and we got you. We are here with you, we stand alongside you, and you can accomplish anything that your heart desires.
Good evening and welcome to the Tuesday, May 13th Community Engagement and Advocacy Committee. Please call the roll.
Ms. Vera?
Yes, for present.
Ms. Reyes?
Here.
Ms. Jures? Mr. Kennedy?
Present.
Ms. McLeod?
Present.
Ms. Snyder?
Present.
Okay, we have a quorum.
Thank you. Colleagues, tonight we will approve our minutes from our March 11th meeting. We also have an exciting presentation from my board colleague, Sarah Ingalls, talking about Policy 7105. We also have an interactive presentation from our treasurer, Mr. Ryan Cook. We also will be giving some updates around government affairs, and then we will adjourn. Is there a motion to approve the agenda?
So moved.
Second? Somebody want to?
Second.
All right, second. Please call the roll.
Ms. Vera?
Yes.
Ms. Reyes?
Yes.
Ms. Jures? Mr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Ms. McLeod?
Yes.
Ms. Snyder?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Wonderful. At this time, we will move into item 2.1, approval.
You missed one. Ms. Barnes.
Ms. Barnes,
No, Ms. Barnes. No.
Oh,
do we have,
did I say it right?
Because you didn't say yes, right? You didn't say the name.
we're missing one, Carl. Should be Quay Barnes.
Yeah. No, it's not.
What should, Noel?
Noel.
Noel. Oh, that's what it is. Her name tag is incorrect. So that's, where's Noel?
That's okay.
I apologize.
You said Ms. Jures.
That's why you kept saying Barnes. I was like, you confused me. I was like, wait a second.
You might be. No, that's
No.
not hers either.
All right, we'll get your corrected name tag. So let the record reflect that Ms. Noel is here.
Because without her, then we don't have quorum. It doesn't pass.
All right, so at this time, we will move into item 2.1, approval of the minutes from March 11th, 2025. Meeting minutes, is there a motion to approve the minutes?
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Please call the roll.
Ms. Vera?
Yes.
Ms. Reyes?
Yes.
Ms. Britt?
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy?
Yes.
Ms. McLeod?
Yes.
Ms. Snyder?
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, thank you. All right, well, welcome back. We haven't formally met. Last month, we had a 2-day series around our governance model, which is student outcomes focused governance model. My goodness. And so thank you all for being there and for participating. I know it was a lot in those 2 days, but it was really important to my colleagues and I to be able to have that time just to dive a little bit deeper into the board's governance, the district's governance model, and being able to work alongside of our coaches and facilitators from the Council of Great City Schools. So that's why we didn't formally meet in this capacity last month. So we are back and really excited to be able to dive into our work. As a reminder, this body, we approved a work plan back at the top of the year, really leaning in on 6 priority areas. So just as a reminder, those key focus areas are school funding, education, and advocacy, school alignment, consolidation, and innovation plan, enhanced community feedback mechanisms, advocacy and policy alignment, building and expanding partnerships, and student experience, specifically looking into our ESL and special education programs and services. And so tonight we will be leaning in into 3 of those areas, really 2 specifically, around our school funding and education and advocacy, and then also our advocacy and policy alignment. So I thank Board Member Ingalls for being with us tonight. And this evening, we're going to be talking about Policy 7105. If you remember, or if you don't know, this will be an opportunity to dive a little bit deeper. Board Policy 7105 is our policy around closure of school buildings. And so last year, the district, we took on the process of a task force where community members came together to evaluate several different Columbus City school buildings, which came back and provided the Board of Education with a formal recommendation. And from that process, the board took some additional research and time and engagement, and then ultimately made some decisions at the end of the year. So that entire process is wrapped into Policy 7105. And tonight, Board Member Ingalls will be talking about where the policy is in her committee structure, and then ultimately wanting to gather feedback from this committee as it relates to any types of potential changes or enhancements to Policy 7105. So at this time, I will hand it over to Board Member Ingalls.
I think it's dead, so I'm just going to.
Here, you can
That's okay.
sign.
I'll just go up here.
Sure.
Thank you, Chair Vera, and thank you, members of the committee, for having me today. My name is Sarah Ingalls. I am a board member on the school board, and I am also the chair of the Policy and Governance Committee. The Policy and Governance Committee is the only statutory committee by which boards of education must have. The other committees are committees that our board has created in alignment with our SOFG model and the work that is to be pursued of the board. But statutorily, the law says we have to have a Policy and Governance Committee, and that is the committee that I chair. The Policy and Governance Committee is responsible for putting forward and discussing policy that the Board of Education will consider. It is also responsible for looking at our governance model and talking about ways that we can integrate that governance model into all of our committee work and all of our board work and really all of our district's work. So that's a little bit about what we do. We meet once every 3 months, and in between, we are working on policy, we are engaging with stakeholders, and we are thinking about what are the priorities of the board in the policy and governance space, and how can we move those forward. So we are one of really the only committee that does not meet as frequently, but it is really important work. And your work is equally important. And this is a fun day where I get to ask you for help with our work, and we can integrate and mesh our work together. So that's what I'm doing with you today. Our committee has considered a number of policies just in the last year. And one of those policies is Board Policy 7105, the closing of school buildings. This policy has been in place for quite some time. Really, I don't know how long, but a very long time. And it is important because it gives the superintendent guidance and our internal auditor and our treasurer guidance on how to go about the school closing process. There is currently a policy, if you go into the board docs on our Board of Education website, you can see the current policy at Policy 7105. The document that is uploaded to this committee, and that is sitting before you today, is a draft revision that our committee has analyzed for 3 or 4 meetings now. So I would say 3 meetings now. So our committee has discussed what we might want to do with a closing of school buildings policy. We have also discussed what has happened with the recent school closure discussions, not only from the board, but also there was a task force that by policy is prescribed to occur and to consider certain factors and information before making recommendations. The task force is chosen and selected by the superintendent. The superintendent gave the board opportunity to weigh in into the types of members or the individuals that we would recommend for the task force, but ultimately that decision per current policy resides with the superintendent. So the task force was selected, and the task force set forth 5.5, 6 months worth of work in determining which schools would be considered for closure. There was a list provided from the superintendent, and the task force took that list, analyzed certain data points and information, and then made an ultimate recommendation to the Board of Education. Per the policy, the Board of Education is not involved in the process of school closure until that recommendation is made. So the announcement was made in January of last year that we were going to look at certain schools for closure. The board did not vote, and in fact did not publicly discuss the school closures or the recommendations or even the factors that the task force was considering really until June. And so that is 6 months of work. You may recall that there was plenty of public feedback during that time, not only about frustration about the process, about worries, concerns, hopes for the future, what we may be building toward as a city school district, but also lots of feedback about why isn't the board doing this or why isn't the board engaging in that. And I want to be very clear that the policy prescribes currently that the board is not involved until that final recommendation stage. So what we have done as a policy governance committee is analyzed what was the feedback that we got the last time that the board considered school closures. What was the community feedback? What was our board feedback? What was our stakeholder feedback? What was the administration's feedback and frustration in going through that process? And we have discussed that as a committee for many months now. We have had multiple presentations, not only on what the closing of school buildings, what happened there. We've had folks come and testify or talk with members of our committee about that process. There was also, at that time, if you recall, there was pretty lengthy public discussion about frustrations with the process and where we may be. At the end of last June, the board decided to hold off on making its ultimate recommendation and engaged in more exploration, went toward the sites that were ultimately recommended, and then in December of last year actually voted on the closure of schools. So there was a recommendation, it was voted on by the board. What we are asking you to do is look at the policy that will be in place for the next opportunity that our board considers school closures. And we know with the state budget that may be a conversation that we have to accelerate, and we'll deal with it when that comes. But I'm not asking this committee necessarily to rush your mind or rush any process because we want a policy that works for us moving forward, and we don't want to do it out of fear of what may be coming down the pike in that front. So what we are asking is that this committee assist us in analyzing the policy, thinking through what our community is asking for, and then helping us engage with members of our community. That includes parents, that includes students, that includes stakeholders, community members, whoever it is that you can help us engage with, we want your help. On the December 9th Policy and Governance Committee, there was a lot of information provided, and I would say if there's any Policy and Governance Committee meeting to watch, that's a really good one, because it gave a lot of information about what was the frustration with the policy in the past, and where we might be moving toward in the future. Auditor O'Connor gave a great presentation about what was our board members' feedback. So he sent a survey to our board members and asked for feedback on what was your frustration in using the policy? What would you recommend in any change of policy? How would you make this better? And how would you make the closing of school buildings something that is more aligned with our intent and our goals as a district? And he provided during that meeting a PowerPoint that is publicly available on the board docs, so you can go through that. But the two things that really resonated out of that, and Auditor O'Connor, I will ask you to interrupt me and correct me if any of this is incorrect, but the two biggest takeaways from that board survey were that the board members felt there was not enough time for community input built into the process, and that board policy did not allow the opportunity for board involvement, specifically at the beginning of the process, when the schools were being considered and the process was being played out. And so that was the feedback from the board. The feedback that we got from the community largely said, we had some sectors of the community, some individuals in the community who really thought that we needed to move faster and that we need to be considering more buildings more often in order to keep pace with the decline of some of our properties. There were also members of the community who had a very different opinion, and that we needed to slow down and really engage our community, think clearly about what we wanted to accomplish, articulate that, and then integrate their feedback into the process. The closing of school buildings policy does not include boundary drawing. And when I say boundary drawing, I mean determining where a student will go after the closure of a building. So all the closure of the school building policy has been set up to do, all it does is it determines which schools will be identified for closure. The boundary process is an entirely separate process that is set up currently by policy to occur after the determination of which school buildings will close. We have heard feedback in the community that people would like to see more conversation integrated to help them understand where we might be going in the future. And so that is something that has been shared and that you may hear when engaging in the community. Our committee also talked about different policies that exist in like school districts, meaning school districts of similar size or city. And we looked at three in particular. We looked at Prince George's County Public Schools in Maryland. We looked at the policy for the Detroit Public Schools, and we looked at the policy for the Denver Public Schools. All three of those policies are posted on the board docs for the December 9th meeting, and so you're welcome to go look at them yourselves. I'll tell you the most robust policy came in Denver Public Schools, which had not only instruction for the criteria that the superintendent would analyze, but also had instruction for how the board would engage the community and how the administration would engage the community. And so our committee discussed the three policies, and I don't want to speak for everybody on the committee, but it sounded like people really wanted to see a little bit more of that community engagement piece outlined in the policy, and they saw some of that in the Denver Public Schools policy. The policy that is sitting at your desk and that, if anyone's at home watching, is uploaded to the board docs for this particular meeting is the revised version of the policy. So it is not current policy. It has revisions that we are recommending at this point, but would like to get some feedback on. And when you look at this document, you can see it's color-coded. The lines on the left-hand side do not indicate anything other than line number, which makes it easier when you're discussing a policy so that you can say, oh, I'm looking at line number 20. Right, and we can all find the same page. So those will not be there when the policy is finalized. The writing in green is new language. So that is language that is not currently found in the policy. The writing that is in black is language that is currently found in the policy. So you can kind of see from the color coding of the document itself how much new language our committee has considered and recommended to go forward. Our committee, Policy and Governance Committee, is also asking for community feedback and collecting that community feedback. And we are going to be uploading it into a form sheet that I will send with President Vera to this committee so that you all can upload any information and feedback that you have into the same exact format that I as chair have asked our committee to provide feedback into. Any feedback is good feedback at this point, and what we don't want to do is force people to give all of the answers. If they don't want to give all the answers, the pieces that they're interested in, we'll take that feedback. So I'll walk you through this policy just a bit, and then I'm happy to answer any questions. So the closing of the school buildings is determining which schools or school shall be closed. It still contains, the way that it's drafted currently, it still contains a task force that is comprised of internal and external participants, directed by the superintendent and approved by the Board of Education. We added language that says that the superintendent and task force shall engage the community in accordance with the community engagement guardrails set forth below. The criteria for task force recommendations are part of what is in current policy, but you'll see in green there is a little bit of new language, so that in making its recommendation, when a task force is analyzing a school closure or closures, that it shall consider the appropriate factors, including but not limited to the following. And there is a list of different factors that had been recommended in previous policy for the school closure task force to consider. I don't think that our committee added any criteria, and part of that was we wanted to see what the feedback was from the community. We do think that a lot of this encompasses what we would want the task force to consider. The task force is not obligated to consider every single factor, and that's something that maybe we want to consider with language in the policy. Should they be required to consider every single factor, or should the Board of Education direct which factors may be relevant or most relevant for that period of time and that period with the community? So that's part of our conversation, is thinking through the criteria for the task force recommendations. Are these things that should be mandatory? Are they things that should be considered? How should that dialogue go about? And then we built in provisions about community engagement and set forth some guardrails about how that community engagement might work. Before I jump to that next section, I'm sorry, I will go back to line 57, which indicates what I tried to describe, but more eloquently. Since conditions may not permit giving equal weight to all factors, decisions shall be based on overall balance and objectivity, and a report to the board on the school closings of specific schools shall include the factors used in the selection process. A statement of rationale for each school affected by the closing of a specific school shall be included in the report and made available to parents and the community. The community engagement guardrails is something that we hope our community engagement committee will be super helpful with, because you all are the experts and you know how to reach out, and we're hoping that you will have robust feedback here. So prior to the presentation of the task force report, and that is the report on what the task force recommends as school closures, the superintendent shall involve the community in meetings and conversations at the regional and individual school level regarding the schools being considered for closure. We put in a recommendation, and this is something that we are malleable on, is we want to have real discussion on. The superintendent shall conduct at least one in-person or virtual meeting, not at a board meeting, in each of the district's regions, including but not limited to at least one in-person or virtual meeting, not at a board meeting, at each school being considered for closure, to inform the community about the school consolidation or closure recommendations, and engage in conversations to consult with communities regarding the potential impacts and potential steps to ensure support for students, families, and staff throughout the process. We set forth some guardrails about what we would suggest the superintendent must discuss during those community engagement meetings. Those are based on the recommendations that we saw in other policies from other similar school districts, including specifically the Denver Public Schools policy. And so we put forward some ideas about, are these the right guardrails for us to make sure that the superintendent is discussing in these community engagement events. And then we put in the further guardrails of, accordingly, superintendent shall not fail to, ensure resources are allocated based on student need, ensure students, parents, and guardians at schools recommended for consolidation are informed about and supported in pursuing the enrollment options available to them, ensuring the impacted students and families by school consolidation shall have priority enrollment into all district-managed lottery schools and a guaranteed seat at their boundary or zone school. Ensure the staff at schools recommended for consolidation or closure are informed and understand available employment opportunities and guarantees in collaboration with employee unions. Demonstrating financial efficiencies through the consolidation of administration and school support services when 2 or more schools are consolidated, providing job search services as well. And then we ended the policy with, in the event that the board votes to approve the superintendent's recommendation to close a building, the community will be engaged in the discussion of future utilization of said building. We do not purport that this is a perfectly written policy. In fact, we could debate for years and years on what is a perfectly written policy. But we are trying to get as close to perfect as we can at this stage without becoming stagnant and moving the work forward. So I don't want to put the pressure on you all that you have to help create some perfect policy. Policy is meant to be changed when it is not working for the purpose for which it was written. And so if the policy doesn't work, we can always revisit it in the future. And that is something that I try to remind our policy and governance folks as well, is we'll do our best to set it up for success, but we can always readjust and revisit policy as a board in the future. In addition, the board always has the power to suspend policies when it's necessary in order to achieve its objective. And so that is always something that is on the table if the board ever was in an emergency or urgent situation where it needed to do so. So I don't want to put I say all of that to say that it's important that we try to get this policy right and we do our best to put the best language forward. And we write it with the clear intent and understanding that we have with the struggles that we've had with the policy in the past. But we know that we're going to have to keep revisiting this as long as we are closing buildings. And so with that, I want to stop, and I'm happy to answer any questions that the committee may have at this time.
Any questions?
Just a point of clarification. So the task force the task force won't consider boundary drawing for recommendation, but the superintendent can, and their presentation to the committee presentation to the community where the students may go, or give them priority to those boundary zone schools.
Yes, so the way that the policy is drafted, the task force would not be considering boundaries. That is a completely separate conversation of, first we're deciding what schools we're closing, then we're deciding what's happening. However, we thought as a committee it was important that the superintendent address those concerns, because that was constant feedback that we had from the community, is you're only telling us you're taking away, but you're not telling us anything that you're giving us, or where you're going to send my kid, or where where our community is going to be successful. And so we felt like building that into the community engagement process that the superintendent engages with is, one, appropriate because the superintendent would be assisting and directing in that process when the boundary process is in process. But also she could give a little bit of her vision for the future, talk more with our community about what's to expect, alleviate any immediate concerns that, your student's not going to have a school, your student will always have a school, and it's just a question of where. And so we thought that including some of that language in the engagement process would give the flexibility so that we could alleviate some of the concerns that were brought forward this last year.
And just to follow up, the school-specific positive implications of line number 76.
Yep.
Does that include what the academic offerings may be now because they're going to a different school or their school is closing, and the benefits that include those kind of academic enrichments and offerings and.
Yeah, absolutely. It could include, what are so I want to be clear for the folks at home, line 76 is, at a minimum, the superintendent shall discuss the following during community engagements, and it's B, school-specific positive implications of proceeding, talking about what it is that we can provide that is positive for our students, including more robust academic programming, including the impact that may have on extracurricular involvement, including any positive implication of proceeding. And then C is kind of the inverse of that, school-specific negative implications of not proceeding with school consolidations. So, we're saying if the school district was saying at that point, we think that the school closure would be beneficial because of these reasons, the inverse of that is if we do not close the school, this is what we're able to proceed with as the status quo.
Any other questions?
I also want to offer that just because you don't have the question right now doesn't mean you can't ask it. I will make sure that I share my email and phone number with, she has it, but I give the chair permission to share my email and phone number with all of you as well. So if you have any questions, I'm happy to answer them to the extent that I can, and get you any feedback.
Thank you. And Board Member Reyes.
Thank you. So I just wanted to make a comment because I think this is obviously a great opportunity for us to have this dialogue as a person that has closed too many schools, and then it's getting harder as we move forward. The hardest decision that you're going to hear from the community, nobody's ever going to say, yay, close my school, for any reason. For any reason. Whether the school is crumbling, whether there's an infestation, whether you have 10 students in a building of 800, I'm exaggerating, but I think as you all review this, I would say one of the hardest decisions is what is the tool, what is the communication, what can we include in here that makes it more understandable for the community as to why it's happening, what are we missing, that because the heart is always going to be with the brick and mortar. But the decision is about not only your child who's now in 5th grade will probably be graduated by the time we close the school or renovate the school, is what is it going to be in the future for the kids that are coming behind your kids, right? So I would love to hear your all's feedback as you look at this, and maybe it's not in policy, but it's maybe as we discuss further as an engagement committee, what are those processes? How do we best communicate? Because I'll tell you from experience, we've had forums. There's and again, they've all been different. Every closing opportunity has been different. We'll have forums where 100 people show up, and it's because it's something that's been in the family for a very long time. Grandfather went here, great-grandfather went here. Great reasons. I am very attached to my high school. I don't know what I would do if they closed my high school, but I come from a small town, so that'll be a very long time. How do we explain to that person who's very in love, and rightfully so, with what that school represents, to say, now you're going to have the opportunity for your child who's been playing both sides of the football field, offense and defense, to go somewhere where they'll be able to really be successful in that one position. Or you have that student that's in this building that can't take an AP course because we don't have AP in that particular building, but we may have it in the next building. And to your point, is like, what do you get as a benefit? We haven't done that as well as we could possibly do it when we do close buildings. So I would love to hear, and maybe it's not in this position, maybe it's at the community, a separate meeting for us, is how do we take this policy that's being created and implemented and given feedback and really put it into practicum. And what does that mean when we come out to the community? Because as Board Member Ingalls said, in where we're going is going to happen. If we want growth and we want to be advanced in having the best school environments for our students, some of our current buildings we can't do that. You can't, there's asbestos, there's a lot of reasons why we cannot make improvements to some of our older buildings. You can't run wires, you can't do a lot of things. So there is a need to have a newer building. So I would love for that, obviously not for today, but for you guys to really think about that. And if you have an answer, please share that with Board Member Rivera. So as we get to that point, that's something that you would share, and we would love to hear your opinions. At least I do.
Yeah, no, I echo that. And this is just, excuse me, this is just a slice of this process. The superintendent or a member of her team will be joining us next month to talk about the present recommendations that the board has in fact already approved and what is coming with that. And you all will be able to provide more feedback as it relates to that engagement rollout. But to my colleague's point, you know, as a person who grew up here and did graduate from Columbus City Schools, Brookhaven High School was my high school, and it's now the home of International High School. And so when you think about a closure or a consolidation, the implications, because they're bigger than just buildings, these are communities, these are memories, this is our history. And so I think a big part of this policy not only is for the community, but it's also for us as board members and as staff to be held accountable to ensure that we are, in fact, you know, meeting the community's needs and we are being transparent about the process. A big part of why we circled back last year as board president, you know, we recognized in listening to the community that this policy was no longer working for the Columbus City Schools of today. That doesn't mean it didn't work 10 years ago or however long we've had it, but recognizing that the climate and the culture and the expectation of what we have for not only the present students, but the future students of this district has changed, and it will continue to change. And so this is a growth opportunity. We've learned a lot in this past year. This is my first formal process of a closure or consolidation from a board perspective. And certainly, you know, we want to be able to get it as best as we can. We're not looking for perfection, as my colleague, Board Member Ingalls mentioned, but it is about progress. And so not wanting to become stagnant just because we've always done something a certain type of way. And so as Board Member Ingalls has mentioned, there will be a survey that's going to go out to each committee member and even the board members that are a part of this committee. I really want you to spend some time evaluating the recommendations, also looking at the policy recommendations from the other districts that were highlighted in the December 9th meeting.
December 9th, yes.
And provide all and any feedback you have as it relates to that. And if there's a certain deadline, Board Member Ingalls, if you can highlight that for us when you send that out, I would greatly appreciate. And then what will happen is if you want to talk about what you plan to do with that data.
Yes, of course. So I am asking for a fairly quick turnaround. The Policy and Governance Committee will meet on June 9th. And so I intend to send you a link to the form. You can fill that form out with as many times as you get feedback. So please do not feel bad submitting 100 pieces of feedback if you have 100 folks who have given you that feedback. We're going to be compiling that data and information and then presenting that out during our Policy and Governance meeting on June 9th. And so it is a fairly quick turnaround. We have been trying to gather information and collect feedback. We will continue to do that with our committee, with your committee, and then the committee will take that feedback and discuss, are there changes that we want to make to the policy? Was the feedback that the policy was perfect as is? I anticipate that will not happen. But you know, what do we want to do moving forward, and how do we want to proceed with this and make a recommendation to the board? Does the committee want to stick with it for another period of time in order to try to get it to a better place based on the feedback? Or is the committee confident that we could send it to the board and get something ready for approval as soon as possible? So that is a discussion that we will be having at that June 9th meeting. But I really appreciate the opportunity to come before you all and for you all listening in on what we have considered and how we might be able to move forward to make sure that we are responsive to our community, that they know that we did hear them during this last round, and that we are trying to implement a process because at the end of the day, for whatever reason, there may be a school that needs to close for whatever reason. And we need, as a board, to have a policy in place that makes sense and that will work for the needs, interests, and expressed ideas of our community. So that's what we're trying to accomplish.
Yeah.
Can I ask one last question to clarify? So if I heard you correctly when you were speaking, you were saying that the task force isn't necessarily required to consider items A through
That's correct.
O.
Yes.
And I know for me, the wording in lines 16 and 17 makes that a little confusing because it's stating that the task force should consider the including but not limited to the following. So I'm reading that as they must consider all of those, and then if they want to throw in an additional 5, they can. So that wording in line 17 is just a little confusing to me because it kind of insinuates they do have to consider every one of those bullet points.
I would agree with you that that wording is currently confusing. So very much noted. And if you wouldn't mind just putting that into the feedback form as well, that would be really helpful. But yes, it is modeled off of what is currently in the policy, that those are factors that have been identified by the board. They do not all have to be considered every time a school is closed, but that's a great discussion to have is should they? Should they be? And then it also gives flexibility, and I think O, I don't have it flipped. Yeah, O, where if things are happening at the moment that the board can make appropriate recommendations for additional considerations.
And I want to thank you, Board Member Ingalls, for your leadership and commitment to getting us to this point. I recognize there's been a lot of meetings, Auditor O'Connor, for your contributions to this work as well, because this is something that has taken quite a bit of time, and certainly we want to make sure that we're able to provide a response to our community in a timely fashion, because as we all know, we have some more decisions to make, and when we make those, that will be something that we need to decide fairly soon, but certainly wanting to have this in place and really defining what do we mean by community engagement, right? If you have a town hall or a forum and there's 10 people there, do we define that as community engagement? So I even think, as we're evaluating this section that has been so greatly added from line 64 on down, really not necessarily getting in the weeds, but really wanting to be very clear about what we define and what we would like the board and the district to consider as it relates to engagement. Because sometimes when I hear that and it's like, well, how many people were there? Like 15. Well, 15 people make the entire decisions of a district of 47,000. So really thinking about how we quantify engagement and what goes into that and the efforts and the steps. Which is something that we can definitely talk to our superintendent or her designee that will be here next month as it relates to the current process that is happening with the recommendations that the board did approve this past December. So thank you, Board Member Ingalls. Colleagues, we'll be sure to get all of that information out to you tomorrow at the latest, so that and if you have any questions or any feedback, something comes to you, you can ask those questions at any time. Any final thoughts for Board Member Ingalls? She does have to leave for another meeting, but certainly want to give room and opportunity. No? Thank you so much. All right, colleagues, we are going to move into item 3.2. We're really excited to be able to have this conversation. So as part of our committee's work plan, as I kind of kicked off our meeting at the top with school funding, education, and advocacy as being one of our key focus areas, and how we define that here as a committee, just for the community's understanding. School funding, education, and advocacy from the committee's perspective is to ensure stakeholders understand and advocate for equitable school funding. And so tonight we will hear from our Treasurer Cook who has been working alongside of our community engagement, Office of Engagement team, alongside of some board members, to really start to create a strategy as to what this will look like. And tonight, colleagues, we want to be also able to gather your feedback as it relates to this strategy. This is a draft, so certainly not a final. So at this time, I'll hand it over to Treasurer Cook.
Thank you. For those that don't know me, my name is Brian Cook, I'm District Treasurer here at Columbus City Schools. And I've been working with Lee Cole and her team, as well as my team, to come up with a community engagement plan. Board Member Vera said it best. It's a draft tonight. I'm excited to present an exercise interactive here with all of you, and then give you an opportunity to look at the plan and perhaps go home, digest that, soak it up, and see what makes sense that's in that plan. I'm happy to come back and have a further discussion after you've had time with that to tweak it, because again, it's a draft. We want to make sure that we do good work and that this makes sense. I'm also going to briefly pinch hit for our government affairs update. I think it kind of ties in nicely with what we have here with respect to the state budget. Tomorrow, Superintendent Chapman, myself, and Chief Operating Officer Woods will be testifying at the Senate with House Bill 96. There's been a tremendous amount of discussion as to the impacts here for our district as well as education as a whole. And I think this exercise is timely in that what's come out of the House version you can equate to a sugar rush. There's some sweeteners in this that put educational funding in peril. And what I mean by that, there is an increase in school funding. They're offering a $20 per student increase next fiscal year, followed by $30 the following year. To me, the most frightening component of that is the fact that we have this fair school funding formula that has been tirelessly advocated for a good number of years. The problem in House Bill 96 is they eradicate that formula. The Department of Education and Workforce can no longer fund it. It still exists, but we have this sweetener on the front end that does indeed provide more money to the tune of approximately $11 million for our district. However, the impact of losing that formula could have a minimum of a $53 million negative impact. So again, as we think about that in terms of context, we've got some candy dishes here tonight that represent our local share, our state share, our federal share, and then I'll call it other. And other is interest income, proceeds from potential sales of tangible items, school buses, those go into PI, property, plant, and equipment that we have internally. The problem with House Bill 96, we've had a lot of discussion. Nobody likes property taxes, but we've seen this ballooning escalation on the local burden that everyone pays. We've got this bucket, the percentage on our $1.7 billion budget, approximately 63%, we're full. And as the state begins to look at shifting away from that formula, what does that mean locally? Well, the state's approximately 20%, and we've got 63. So as they take more out of their state share and we dump it over here onto the local burden, we're already, it's problematic because we're full, we're overflowing. So there's that shift that begins to take place. That's really what this advocacy effort is about. What's fair for students? How does that benefit our district, but education as a whole? If we lose that formula, we lose that ability to adequately fund our classrooms moving forward. There's a tremendous cascade effect as well at the federal level. A tremendous amount of discussion and pressure on federal programs, and what is that administration going to do as we navigate forward? So we've got challenges locally with property taxes, we've got challenges at the state level with state funding, and then we face at the federal level, for context, approximately another $160 million of funding that's at risk. If that goes away, it isn't shifting to the state. We're coming back over here, and it starts to get even messier. So we've got this sugar rush that sounds good with respect to an increase in funding of $11 million. But as most of us know, anytime you load up on candy and sweet treats, eventually the headache sets in. And the reality starts to think, boy, in the long run, maybe that wasn't such a great choice. I should have had a piece of chicken and some green beans instead of a bowl of ice cream and a Snickers bar. Guilty. That's really where the focus needs to be, the long run. The short term, yes, can help us, but if we focus solely on the short term, we're going to pay a dear, dear price in the long run. I've seen that. I'm now one of the older folks, fatter, balder, grayer in school finance, and I lived through residual budgeting. This concept of, we're going to give you $20 a student. We're going to give you $30 a student. And what that really equates to is, what do they have left at the end of their prioritization? Because somebody said it the other night in our town hall, budgets really are about priorities. That's a fact. So as the state sets their priorities, are we at the bottom of their list? Does that potentially mean $50? I remember the days, and I'm embarrassed to admit it, we saw a $100 increase, and we were happy. It didn't keep up. I mean, we're seeing it, all the discussion about eggs. I know we make a lot of jokes. It's true. We face those same issues here with our light bills, curriculum, etc. We're not getting relief. So that's really what, I hate to call it this fight, but that's what this fight is about. That's the advocacy that needs to take place. We have time. As we said at our town hall, it's time for our communities to get involved, become active with our legislatures, let them know the importance of local education. Education is workforce, and the state has said that's a priority. So in order for workforce to develop and grow, we need to make sure we fund and prioritize education. So Leah and I have spent some time. This is one of many examples. We've got some things in our plan we'll talk about. I've got a presentation tonight. I'm going to ask Lee to weigh in as we go through it. But we really, school finance is complex. It's not as simple as 4 buckets. We've got this funding formula. There's all sorts of levers that, you push here and you pull there, and it affects 15 different things. So we really need to make sure that as we go on the road, for lack of a better word, how do we get our community involved in understanding at even a cursory level? Because the simple fact is, this proposed state budget will force our district, as well as others, to be on the ballot much more frequently. I'm still trying to wrap my head around the fact there's a lot of chatter on property tax relief. I don't understand how we're going to relieve property taxes by taking the state bucket, emptying it, and putting it over here on the local level. The feds aren't coming to help. So again, we've got to advocate. But this, to me, I thought did a good job. We'll pass this around if you want to get that sugar rush as we go through it. But that's school funding in a nutshell. These 4 components on our $1.7 billion budget locally, you can see that local bucket's full, and I fear that as we shift that, what price do we pay in the long run? Anything you want to add? Putting you on the spot. Take some candy. We've got a lot of different concepts, as I say. We'll go through the plan. I'm not going to read it to you. We've got a presentation here. We'll go through it. But I think the key is our teams have been active together. We've been involved. We know that we do need to take this show on the road. We need to get out there to our community and engage and talk about school funding, not at a real in-depth, but at a simplified level so that folks begin to understand what's really at stake and how does this all fit. Last plug, I will encourage community that's online tonight, tune into that last board meeting. We discussed our 5-year forecast. I think there was some good questions that the board asked. I did a presentation that I think lays it out. You'll see a difference in some numbers. The 5-year forecast is general fund only. This is a holistic $1.7 billion view. So that's a piece of what we talked about here tonight.
Does anyone have any questions about the initial presentation? Good. Thoughts on the demo? Good? Thank you.
I think they're hungry. There's I'm going to get this reputation at meetings. There's food, so.
I thought it was taffy. No, it's not taffy.
That's right. No, you're right.
So again, thank you for your time. Placed before each of you is a draft of the Treasurer's Office outreach and engagement strategy. In that document, you will see what we have as our SWOT analysis. It also has some of the tactics and the strategies that we would like your feedback in deploying out into the community. On the last couple of pages, there's a section for your notes. We encourage you to write on it, really think about it as Treasurer Cook gives you an overview of the plan. But you will see in that document our goals, our objectives, the audiences that we would like to target and speak to. It is definitely a holistic strategy that not only talks to our elementary students, but all the way to our seniors. So I hope you enjoy the presentation. Look forward to your feedback, and we're here for you. So thank you.
Thank you.
So there's two, right? You have a packet.
One is the actual slideshow. The other is the in-depth presentation.
And you're going
of
over the
actual
slideshow?
I'm going to
plan.
go through the slideshow
Okay.
next. The document that's marked draft is the community engagement plan
Right.
that my team and Lee's team developed.
Okay.
As Lee just mentioned, there's a lot of detail in that draft. What we haven't formalized at this point are the dates as to when we're going to do these certain activities and events. But now that we have a solid plan to work from, our teams are going to coordinate on that and begin to roll this out in phases. So again, take that document home. I would love feedback. I put a business card in front of you. Feel free to call or email. We're very much willing to refine this as we navigate through it. So I appreciate your patience on this first run tonight, if you will.
And you'll receive, once we gather your feedback at the next meeting, should be the final version with the timeline attached.
Perfect. Okay, engagement objectives. Welcome to our comprehensive outreach strategy. We're at from a school funding standpoint, and most importantly, build trust. In my business with finances, trust is everything. Together, we're going to strengthen the foundation of our district through informed dialogue, and I can't say enough about that. I think we heard it with respect to the policy tonight on school closures. That informed dialogue is absolutely critical. We can't expect our community to meet us halfway if we're not willing to meet them all the way with respect to how the impacts from a fiscal standpoint impact students. Key messages, the primary objective is to create connections. I'm constantly talking to my team about the importance of people. What we do in the school business all ties back directly to people. That's built upon trust and relationships. Again, accurate data. Oftentimes, as a school finance professional, the numbers that we present isn't necessarily a fun topic. However, again, it's providing and building that trust through the facts of where we're at. Painting a picture through numbers, but then using that data to create a narrative that makes sense for the district. How do we maximize where we want to get as a district based on the resources that we have at the local level? We just saw those 4 buckets again. We're in that phase where we have to maximize resources. I think the main point that I'd like to sum up with this key message here, everything we do, it's about all students, not just one group in particular. And the statement that it takes a village, to me, is very true. That's our community. That's our district. That's our district leadership, most importantly, our teachers and parents. They're the front line on this, and it takes resources. So again, it's a strategic outreach plan. I feel very comfortable with the route we're engaging in this draft. It's important that we get that feedback, and as we begin to roll these exercises out, make no mistake, I'm sure we'll have some blooper reels as we go through this, but I think that makes it relatable. I think as we try to connect with our community and build relationships and trust, I don't need to get into how does a funding guarantee work. The fact that we have it, what does it mean for our light bill, for your son or daughter's education with respect to what curriculum can our superintendent provide? What resources does our board have at their disposal? I think we have to take it down to where they're at and not lose them with big words and, for lack of a better word, gobbledygook, if that makes sense. Because school finance is complex. I mean, I have this conversation. There are things I learn about it every day. So it's a difficult and oftentimes not a friendly topic. SWOT analysis. I don't know if you want to weigh in on this. I think it really is about understanding where we're at. It helps us develop targeted strategies and leverage our assets. I know the board has had a number of conversations with me. How do we leverage the assets that we have? We just heard a policy about closing school facilities. Never a fun discussion, but how do we maximize those facilities? What opportunities do we have to navigate forward from a fiscal standpoint? I think we've got a lot of strengths, we've got weaknesses, we've got opportunities, and then there are threats. And I would label what we did tonight holistically as a threat to not only Columbus City Schools, but education as a larger group. I don't want to take the focus away from us, but there's strength in numbers, and public education matters. What we do for our students matters. So that's a threat. We have to have our mind on that and our focus over the next 30 days on what does this lead us to. But I think we have to be honest with ourselves. We're not perfect. We know that. We can't let great be the enemy of good, or whatever the saying is. We have to be able to move forward, recognize where we're at, and then turn some of these weaknesses into opportunities, and then hopefully those opportunities into strengths. And that's my role and my team's role from a fiscal standpoint. I'm fortunate that I have Lee and her team to help us really navigate some of these and bring relatable exercises to the community as we navigate forward. Anything you want to add there on that? Good. Absolutely. So from a budgeting standpoint, the state budget must be passed by the end of June 30. By July 1, we have to have a new cycle. So we have just a smidge more than 30, but time is starting to slip away. May, in my mind, is gone. So we really have the remaining time in May and then the month of June to advocate and let our legislators, our elected officials know how important this funding impact is for us locally. Our work here administratively continues. As I said, we'll be at the Senate tomorrow advocating. It doesn't stop. We continue to have meetings with our legislators on a daily basis, local and statewide, because again, I think it's critical. Feedback I've gotten is we can't focus just on our area. We have to go out and get the rural areas as well. Unfortunately, this is a very political issue at this time, so we're working hard with our other districts, our other district administration to key that. But the next, in my mind, 30 days really tell the tape on where does this budget end up. The House bill is frightening. We'll know more as we navigate through it. We've had some positive meetings. There's some things we think are coming. We just don't know the final granular details just yet, but we've got a small window of time to act. Outreach efforts, 4 interconnected goals: literacy, transparency, community support. Those are the main focal points. And again, I think it's not literacy from a standpoint of reading, it's a financial literacy component. Again, painting the picture of what are the impacts. How is this going to potentially hurt our district and force even more of an over-reliance from a fiscal standpoint on local property taxes? So that's really what our goal is with, again, build trust, show the impact, and then that should hopefully empower our community to engage with the board and have a better understanding of where we are today, where do we want to be with respect to a facilities plan, an academic plan, and a finance plan, hand in hand.
In the other packet where you have the more detailed outline of some of the strategies and tactics, we're really focused on achieving these goals by talking to every aspect of the community. And when we say every aspect, there are over 900,000 people in the city of Columbus who are using their tax dollars to not only uplift our students, but they really support Columbus City Schools. And Columbus City Schools is also an anchor institution within Central Ohio. So in our communication strategy, what we're looking to do is not only talk to kids and talk to students, but people who are just everyday Joe and Jane public taxpayers who do not have kids in the district, no family in the district, but their tax dollars are uplifting the district. So the strategies and tactics in this plan involve normalizing language so that everyone knows of what we're doing. They know the return on investment of their tax dollars, as everyone is paying property taxes within the district, whether you're a renter or a homeowner. We want to make sure that we have strategies and tactics that will not only communicate to them, but also normalize language so they can understand how these decisions impact them and feel as that they have an active voice in it as well. So that is involved in our goals and strategy. And also, we have an excellent treasurer and his team, and they have won numerous awards for fiscal reporting and accountability. So some of those things we want to share out with the community. And then we also want to use many different avenues for touches, reaching out to our area commissions, our civic associations, having the treasurer's column in some of their publications, reaching out beyond our regular traditional media, but our minority media and our English as second language media components as their tax dollars, and they are investing in our district as well. So some of the strategies and tactics in this plan cover a multitude of avenues, a multitude of channels to reach as many constituents as possible, including paid social media, awareness campaigns, and workshops and things of the like. So I think when you really dive into the tactics and the strategies of the plan, hopefully you will enjoy them and see just the kind of fun that you can have talking about finance, because one of our district goals is math and literacy, and part of what the Treasurer's Office is going to bring out is you too are a math person. It's talking about the budget as well.
Yeah, so I think to piggyback on that concept, there's a lot in this plan that we think encompasses, but as members of the community, we want your feedback. I'm sure there's some things we missed, some ideas that you have at the table that might enhance this even further. It's important as we navigate through this, we're going to use quantitative data. How do we measure success? Is this resonating? Is it working? We're going to gather feedback. And I think from my experience with Lee and her team working with mine, we're going to be agile and nimble, and we're going to adjust this as we go. Because again, we don't have all the answers, but I think we have to be real, we have to be authentic, and believe it or not, it's okay to say I don't know, but I'll get you that. So I think we're going to build that trust, but I think we're going to make sure as we go through the outcomes, improve financial literacy. I think a big one for city school districts in general is a positive perception. I hate to say changing the narrative, but it's true. The programs and the opportunities we provide for the community and our students, we need to highlight those, along with the associated investment that the board is making in those to drive student achievement. So those are key. I think enhanced office visibility. We like to be modest. Lee's not wrong. We have a successful track record. We pride ourselves on getting things right. And that lends credibility to being a good steward of district resources. We need to toot our horn. It's often uncomfortable for us, but I think it's important to let the community know we are good stewards of their tax dollars. And that's a component of this plan. And I think in closing, community advocacy. We have to advocate for our community. We know our students, we know our parents, we know our community, and that's the messaging that we need to take forth. Unfortunately, there is a tremendous financial component to running a school district, but at the end of the day, it's about kids. So how do we tie our fiscal message into the impact on students? And I think that's what we're really trying to do here at the end of the day, not get into the weeds on this component shifts here, but here's the real-time impact that we're staring in the face at Columbus City Schools, and here's how we see this impacting your wallet in a positive or a negative fashion. If we do it right, there's a tremendous positive return on investment for students in the classroom, and that's really what we're trying to achieve. I think everyone in their respective departments wants to achieve, and we just need to work hard to get that message out there. So we're willing, I'm willing, my team will go where we need to go. We'll meet the community where the community is at. So as you engage and digest this plan, please provide that feedback. That'll really help us. Anything in closing?
No, I think you said it best. Again, this is a team effort. We're really excited to present this to you. Welcome your feedback, looking forward to your feedback. And again, we are, our primary focus is student achievement. And if we are laser focused on that, I think that would allow us to be even more global in our message, because everyone wants to see the children succeed. And as long as we keep our eye on that North Star, global citizens, I think we'll be fine.
Last plug, if you get the chance to watch Senate testimony tomorrow, we have an amazing student who is going to be there to testify. I can't say enough about that young man. I had the opportunity to meet with him at the town hall, but he's going to rock and roll tomorrow. So if you get the opportunity, please tune into that. I would encourage it. Thank you. We'll entertain any questions you have.
Yes, please.
Any questions? I have a couple just clarifying things, Treasurer Cook. When would you like, so I know Board Member Ingalls mentioned June 9th is kind of her deadline for our feedback as it relates to the policy. What is helpful for you? As we know, this is a very also time-sensitive process. So we want to be mindful of everyone's capacity here, but also recognizing that you need this committee's feedback and weigh in for this process. So what turnaround time frame are you looking for?
I don't want to burden the committee, but if we can have some initial feedback, perhaps, that really is, Lee just said it best, it's a living document. So if there's some thoughts that immediately hit your head, ways we can improve this, June 9th would be wonderful.
Okay.
And then again, we'll constantly evolve and tweak, and I'm happy to come back and report to the committee some of the metrics that we've seen from a qualitative standpoint, share feedback. It can be an ongoing process with the community. That would be my goal. But, yeah.
And just for the committee to weigh in, do you prefer just to send feedback directly to Treasurer Cook in an email format, or would you also like some kind of Microsoft form, Google form to input your data in a more organized, structured way? Okay.
I'm seeing some head nods.
Yes.
We'll make it happen.
Okay, so we can just get
Yeah,
a Google
yeah.
form or a Microsoft form with just some of those, questions, and then a space that we can put all the things,
Absolutely.
all the dump in. I think that would be really helpful. That way I send you one email with 2 links, June the 9th, and then it's just much more organized and structured in that way.
Perfect.
And so that was my first point of clarification. Secondly, I also, I want to kind of circle into what happened last week as it relates to the town hall. I know you alluded a little bit to that, which I really appreciated. This committee last year, we kind of started having some robust conversations around engagement, and some of you that were a part of this committee last year gave really good feedback as it related to what we can start to think about as it related to engagement. And I remember one of the conversations being around the partners who are in our district. How are we partnering with you all who are frontline, with many of our families, many of our constituents, making sure that you have the information so that we can work in partnership with you to then go into your spaces and also provide information like fair school funding or policy changes. So as you're also evaluating this kind of draft plan, let's think about this from also a partnership piece of it. What would this look like for us to come in partnership with your organizations to provide this information as well? And so I think a big part of what last week, that town hall really was a quick conversation that Beth Hess had. This conversation started last year in this room, and then our government affairs director, Beth Hess, worked alongside of many amazing team members in the district to actually put on a town hall last week on May the 7th, and that was held in partnership, in community at East High School. And I want to just thank my colleagues. I want to thank everybody who was a part of that, because we had an opportunity to have another touch point around fair school funding and the implications of what we are facing, the realities of what we're facing. And, Vice President Adair was a part of that panel, President Cole, in addition to Senator Craig, State Representative Abdullahi, Rep. Humphrey, Rep. Geralds, Rep. Brown Picolotanio, I always say that wrong. But it was a really robust conversation because we do have people fighting alongside of us. So certainly we appreciate those in the State House and in the Senate and in the community who are partnering alongside of us. So that video is also on our website. We're trying to figure out how we can create bite-sized versions of some of the information, because sometimes whole hour-long conversation, 2-hour-long conversation. Many folks don't have the time and capacity to sit through that, but can we create bite-sized 2-minute pieces of that particular presentation as part of this strategy? Because part of this committee's work plan and our commitment was to really think about ways that we can launch school funding education campaign for stakeholders. So that's part of our school funding education and stakeholder mapping, part of our work in partnership with the Treasurer and our Office of Engagement. And so I wanted to highlight the town hall that happened last week, and then also wanted to also mention if any one of you have interest in advocating or information as to how we can distribute that. I know it gets a little gray when it comes to our students and things of that nature, but as part of this committee, certainly, your voice matters, your expertise matters, and this is why we are in partnership and community with each one of you as well. So certainly if you have questions about that process, we can put you in contact with Beth Hess, who's our Director of Government Affairs. If you have questions about what that looks like, Ryan has been down there quite a few times. Many of us have been down there, so we're happy to be able to provide just insight and feedback as to what that process looks like. Any other questions or comments or anything related to the draft engagement plan? So Treasurer Cook, can you just mention or give us a synopsis? Once we provide the feedback, you will then go back, look it over, and then ultimately this committee will provide a recommendation to the Treasurer Cook, which then we will go present this to the full board as part of just our takeaway from these conversations, because we've been having these conversations for a little while now, and this would be something that the board would then be briefed on, and then ultimately they can choose to say, Treasurer Cook, we want you to do this, and so that's, if I'm right.
You nailed
Okay.
it. You nailed it, yes.
All right. Is
Yep.
there anything you would want to add to that?
No, I appreciate the opportunity to be here tonight. I haven't had that chance before, so thank you. I hope to be here a little more regularly and provide you with some updates. And I want to thank Lee and her team. None of this is possible without her, so thank you.
And then Treasurer Cook, anything else? I know Director Hess said that you might be, was there any other updates that she wanted you to share with
No,
the
it's just as we
committee?
discussed this afternoon, high-level budget. Just really watch, advocate, just contact your legislatures, let them know how important public education, specifically Columbus City Schools, is, and what that impact is going to be for not only your student, but our student as a whole. Again, work still continues, we continue to advocate, and it's not done. It's never done, technically.
Yes, and we appreciate all of your hard work, everybody's hard work. That is a part of that. So colleagues, I will be getting that information out to you tomorrow. I'll be working with Carl. Once we get the links from all the folks, we'll gather everything, send it out to you. Certainly, if you have questions about any of the materials that you've been given tonight, whether it be the policy draft or this engagement draft, please feel free to reach out to me or reach out to any one of my colleagues here. And as Board Member Ingalls mentioned, that survey is not exclusive just to you all. Certainly feel free to gather feedback from your colleagues or the people you trust, because we want to be able to ensure that we are gathering the community's feedback as it relates to these topics. This won't be the be-all. This is just another addition to the work. Next month, we can anticipate hearing from the superintendent's office as it relates to our present realignment process, and so that is to come, and we'll have a couple other updates on some pending items. Anything that a member would like to discuss or anything anybody would like to offer before we adjourn? I know this was a lot, and you're like, all this homework, we didn't sign up for this, but just know that your work is very meaningful, and these are two very meaningful areas of focus right now for our community, our board, our district. So I just want to say thank you in advance for taking the time to read through these policies, to read through these drafts. We want to get better, we want to improve, and we can't do that by ourselves. And so we thank you in advance for the time that it will take. And if you have any questions or any other additional feedback as to how we can continue to improve on this, we are always open to that. So thank you. With that being said, all I need is a motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
Second. Please call the roll. Yes. Reyes? You gotta say, you want.
Oh, yes.
Ms. Jers?
Yes.
Mr. Kennedy?
Yes.
We can't do the.
Cloud?
Yes.
Ms. Snyder?
Yes.
Ms. Britt?
Yes.
We are adjourned.
All right, thank you all, and thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next month.
Be able to come out